is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's fired. He throws. It is.
Past our prime, that's who we are. Not necessarily what we are, but who we are. Bill Mahoney, Mark Hoffman joining me, Scott Johnson, for another great show as we delve into the 1974 World Series between the Oakland A's and the Los Angeles Dodgers. They are on the cover of this week's issue of Sports Illustrated, and we will be discussing that series as the A's look to go for their third straight World Series. Dodgers are actually favored to dethrone the champs.
The A's were not, in every World Series it seems like they were.
Yeah. Two of the three, they were the underdogs.
Yeah.
They never kind of got their due, and then they'd win, and people would be like, "Wow, they're good."
Exactly.
And the 70s for the Dodgers were like, we get to the World Series, but we just can't win one.
That's right. That was 3 losses in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's an all-California World Series, Mark, and that was the first time that had ever happened. Not the last. 1989, the A's and Giants. 2002, Angels and Giants. So California was just kind of getting on the map for pro teams back then.
Well, the letter to the publisher talks about how California is the most populous state in the nation and is now a supermarket of sports teams with 20 professional teams. Though they said 5 Major League Baseball teams, okay? Mm-hmm. So that I can understand. The Padres, Dodgers, Angels, Giants, A's, okay? Mm-hmm. Then they say 5 pro football teams, but I'm thinking Niners, Raiders, Rams, Chargers. Who am I missing? There was no second LA team back then, so I'm trying to figure out who their 5th pro team is.
WFL?
Oh, the Southern California Sun. You're right. There's your 5th team. 3 pro basketball teams. So that would be, I guess, the Conquistadors, the Lakers, we didn't have the San Diego Clippers, the Warriors. And then they had 3 hockey teams, the Sharks, the Kings, and the Seals up in the Bay Area. 2 soccer teams. I won't even go down that road. 2 tennis teams. Don't go down that road. But anyway.
Yeah.
They were there.
A lot of sports teams in California.
The state's pretty big.
It is.
I mean, Texas is a huge state too, but, it's confined to Dallas, Houston, San Antonio.
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, here comes our weekly revenue source. This has been I just made another purchase for the show, and it's so nice to know that I'm going to be reimbursed.
You know what's funny?
Yeah, no worries there.
If I was still doing my physical therapy, I could have approached this person to be on the show to talk about his ad. So the ad in question is right where the scorecard starts. It's a Jim Beam ad, and it's 2 one-of-a-kind originals. Jim Beam, and then the actor Elliot Gould, who is still with us today.
Ruben.
Yeah, who was married to Barbara Streisand at one time. But I used to do physical therapy when I was having an issue with my back, and he was there too doing the physical therapy and stuff at the time and the stretching or whatever. But, I mean, he was in a lot of movies. People might not know the original movie MASH.
I liked him in Ocean's 11.
He was in all the Ocean's movies.
I always think this is funny when you have an actor that's been around for so long, is that my kids know him as Monica.
That's right.
Monica
and her father. Monica Geller's father.
Monica and Ross's father.
That's right.
And so, I'm like, oh, you know who Elliot Gould is, but not the Elliot Gould I know.
And I mean, at the beginning of his career, he had Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice.
That's right. I heard that was good.
Groundbreaking film. Capricorn 1 with O.J.
Another
Simpson.
another underrated movie.
Yeah. Where he saves James Brolin.
There are some people that when you go on their IMDb page, it's going to take a while for you to get through all their credits.
They didn't have this when we were young, but I would go to my mom. We didn't have IMDb, but I'd look at an actor that was older, And I go, Mom, man, he's pretty good. My mom would sort of roll her eyes because she had been around when he was, let's say James Cagney.
Right.
She'd be like, Gregory Peck. And I'd be like, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
She'd be like, he's been around. I'm like, yeah, he's never. Just an
I've
old
never
guy.
seen him.
Yeah, he's terrible.
But, they call him the new breed of actor in this ad.
Yeah, because he is.
Not anymore.
We can say that about
Now
all
he's
of
just
us.
a breed.
All right, let's get to the scorecard. And this is one you can hardly believe is true. It's about Washington and Lee University, losers of 10 straight games. They're leading Randolph-Macon 20-18, Billy, and what happens?
Well, this young guy, he intercepts a pass on his own 5-yard line. Oh, yeah, look at that. That's over. The game's done, right? Yeah, he intercepted. But no, the young man skipped to it in his own end zone and touched the football down. So he got the interception, went the wrong way, touched the ball down. For a safety, it turned out to be a safety and a 20-20 tie. What's his name, though? He had a friend, Lucy, Linus, Charlie Brown.
I know. Can you imagine
boy.
Charley,
Yeah.
but still, Charlie Brown, you knucklehead.
Yeah.
If he had just caught the ball and
just
kept
struck it
going
down.
If only
That's all.
Game
Lucy
over.
had pulled the football from
That's
him
right.
before he
That's
put
right.
it down, it would have been fine.
But wasn't there Jim Marshall also ran the wrong way?
Yes,
Yeah,
he did.
Okay,
The
so it
Minnesota
does
Vikings.
Yeah.
Against the 49ers. He ran
Yeah.
wrong. And the 40 he gets in the end zone, and this 49er guy is running with him because he wanted to make sure he didn't change the direction.
Right.
He gets into the end zone, and he throws the ball in the air, and the 49er guy goes up to him and pats him on the shoulder and says, "Thank you, good job." And he's like, "Oh, what?"
I wonder who won that game. I wonder if that
that's
was
a good
it's
question.
like this one determined the
Yeah, it
outcome
did.
of the game.
It did. It just ended up being a tie, so at least you
Right.
can't say you didn't
And
lose,
they've
but-
lost 10 straight. They're about to win a game.
Yep. And it's true. It's just how many times do we watch a game, all of us, and a guy does something at the end of the game, like an interception, and I yell, "Go down!
Go down!"
And
Yeah.
they're trying to run up the field.
Right,
I'm
they
like,
pitch it.
dude, yes.
I think I told this story. I played this intramural football at UCLA, and we were playing this other team, and it goes to a tie, and they played sort of this weird rule where if you didn't score, whoever had the ball on the other side of the field won the game. So we have the ball. Our quarterback throws an interception. So technically game's over. But the other guy doesn't, go down to a knee or something like that. He's running around. He's taunting us. He puts the football out. One of our guys goes up and slaps the football out of his hand, picks it up, and runs the other way for a score. So the officials are really rule we won the game. But this other team starts complaining. They were a fraternity, and they're complaining. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And then they bring in some intramural director, and we should have just left the field. And the intramural director goes, well, maybe you should just replay it. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, it's his fault that he held that. We should not replay it. But they made us replay it, and we lost the game. That
Well, if
was
you're going to talk
unfair.
trash, you lose then, man.
Yeah,
I mean, just
absolutely.
shut
Yeah,
up.
what kind of lesson
Absolutely.
is that?
Unless they came crying like a little baby. Like,
Right.
oh, no, game should be over. I intercepted the ball.
All right. For a brief second, there seemed like there was going to be an international incident between Canada and Russia. After checking into Moscow's Hotel Russia, Team Canada member Pat Stapleton complained to manager Bill Hunter, "My room is bugged." Hunter, horrified, "How do you know?" Stapleton, "I can see them running around the bathroom." So it goes from being scary to really scary.
Yes, right.
Gross. Mark, what do you got?
Well, we were talking about how that crazy ending at that Washington Lee game. How about this one? BYU is leading Colorado State 33-27 with 6 seconds remaining.
Game over.
Right. The quarterback is going to run out the clock by falling on the ball. But an unearthly yell by a linebacker on Colorado State rattles his concentration, and the ball is on the ground, and Colorado State recovers at the 15-yard line with 3 seconds left. I don't know what the guy could have possibly yelled, but you know what? Just fall on the damn ball.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I mean,
Yeah.
You know the
Right.
play.
And that's a penalty now. You know they have penalties now where if the defense tries to
you can't do
interrupt the
that.
cadence,
You
or
can't
whatever,
do that.
you can't do that.
Well, that I understand,
Right.
but once the play is going,
Yeah, but still, I don't get it. So anyway, the Ram bench, which Colorado State Rams, goes crazy. Hey, this is unbelievable. We have a chance in the game, okay? And they actually they score in the next play to tie the game. Extra point wins it, and the Rams bench is erupting, jumping up and down. They get penalized for, legal celebration, disorderly conduct, whatever you want to call it. So now it's a 35-yard extra. The ball is kicked, and it's wide, but the noise is so loud that the official can't hear anything. He has his hands over his ear. He basically then just put his hands up in the air to signal, okay, it's, not good. But they thought he was signaling the extra point is good, and that Colorado State had won the game 34-33. And that lasted for about a half an hour until finally the officials said the kick's not good and explained what had happened. So talk about,
complete
chaos.
Your BYU, you think you've won the game, then you think you've lost the game, then you find it's a tie. Talk about the, ups and downs of emotions.
Absolutely. All right, they said it. Why don't you go first, Billy?
Okay, Robert Harris, he's a Canadian millionaire. Now that he'd be a billionaire, evidently, today. Describing what he would do if his Portland Storm, last in the WFL Western Division, lost $1 million this season. He goes, I'd sell one of my buildings, and I'd only have 49 left. Jeez. Damn, would that be nice to be able,
Yeah.
Damn.
You sold 2% of your real estate holdings.
And now those buildings are worth $1 billion.
I know, that's what I'm saying. He'd be,
But it's like the line in Citizen Kane, the very famous movie, where his accountants complaining to him, you're losing money, you're going to lose $1 million this year running this newspaper. And the Orson Welles character goes, well, at that rate, I'll have to declare bankruptcy in 50 years.
I want that opportunity to be able to lose $1 million and have no sweat about it.
Yeah, well, if Mark keeps selling these
I know
ads,
that. TWA keeps calling every day trying to re-up us.
Elliot Gould, we're rolling with the big guys now.
Yep.
All right, our cover story: A's and Dodgers going at it, an all-California World Series. As we mentioned, this was the first time that happened in baseball. Mm-hmm. I can't think off the top of my head having it happen in any other sport. Has a Super Bowl been played between two California teams? Raiders? No. Chargers, Niners.
Yeah. That's right. No, that's right.
Chargers,
That's right. It was a heck of a game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so close. Outcome and down from
Steve
the
Young's still throwing touchdowns.
Yeah, I think the Niners spotted him 40 and barely covered.
Exactly. Damn.
That was like we mentioned earlier, man. There were some Super Bowls back in that era that were just by halftime. You're like, well, I guess I'll have some more 7-layer dip.
Yeah, and that's because you're all amped for the game, and then all of a sudden, second quarter, you're like, so what are you doing tomorrow?
Doug Williams, there was like 5
I know he
touchdowns
did the
in
second
one
quarter. Yeah, and you're like, okay. And
who was
Denver
that
had
running
the
back?
lead.
Timmy something.
Timmy Brown?
The running back for the Redskins who never did anything and then was Super Bowl MVP. I forget what his name was. Oh, but whatever. Okay. 1974, it's the young Dodgers against the seasoned A's, and Oakland was having their typical off-field issues. Mike Andrews, he's suing them. How come?
Oh, this is so weird. So Mike Andrews in the 1973 World Series made a bunch of errors. Okay, he made 2 errors in one of the games where the Mets ended up beating the A's. So Charlie Finley was just had him sign a false affidavit saying he was injured, thus making him ineligible to play for the rest of the series.
Right, because you couldn't just take a guy off the roster.
Yeah.
The roster's set unless they get injured.
Yep.
Then you can make an adjustment. So he made him lie because he was so mad at him for making these errors.
And Dick Williams, the manager, rallied to his defense. He basically put his number 17 on their uniforms, with athletic tape as a show of solidarity. And then Bill Kuhn finally made Finley reinstate him. He entered Game 4 as a pinch hitter. This is in the '73 World Series, and got a standing ovation from the Mets fans. He grounded out, and then Finley ordered him to the bench for the remainder of the series. He was given his unconditional release in November. He never played another major league game, though he did end up in Japan. But he ended up then suing them for basically, mental stress and mental anxiety and stuff. And
it was a real dividing issue.
He didn't want to come back. Andrews, when they had to find him, they had to search for him. They didn't know where he went, and he didn't want to come back because he was worried about what his teammates would think of him.
Oh, and his teammates all were
loved him,
come back,
but he didn't know that. They said when he got off the bus, he was like the last guy, and he hadn't gone in the clubhouse yet, and he just felt
like he already didn't feel like crap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but to have this bully publicly shame him, basically, he was.
And this is all going on when you're trying to win a World Series.
I know that. How they were able to do that.
Well, you know, and even bigger news, Finley didn't pay Catfish Hunter's full salary, therefore making Hunter, according to his lawyer, a free agent. And it says in this article that Catfish actually, you know, could have looked at actually pitching for the Dodgers against the A's.
That would have been hilarious.
Wouldn't that have been crazy?
Yeah.
Obviously he didn't, but he could have. And then Blue Moon Odom and Raleigh Fingers, Billy.
Yeah, they got in another fight. Odom asked Fingers if he needed extra tickets. And Fingers got all mad. Said, "No, I've got it all taken care of." He goes, Odom said, "Just want to make sure in case your ex wants to bring her boyfriend with her." And they tackled each other in the clubhouse. And I guess Fingers got a real big cut on his head. He needed 5 stitches. Yeah. And Odom had a bad ankle. And then they went out and kept playing.
Yeah.
I mean.
That was before the series started.
Yes.
And then, you know, that's the other thing. They go on and they win these games. They're tight games. Yeah. Like every game in this series but one's a 1-run series, you know. Yeah. How they were able to just put that stuff aside.
Yeah, and even Billy North and Reggie Jackson were at each other's throats. Yeah. You know, over a woman. And they didn't talk with each other. And finally Bill North went up and said, "Hey, we got to end this, and I'm your guy." But it seemed like everybody other than Catfish Hunter had a beef with someone on the team. Right. And it was always, they said, they like to needle a lot. And I kept thinking, well, when you're throwing, you know, punches, you know, I don't know if that's...
Well, I mean, you can keep winning that way, you know, and teams have done that. But you can't sustain winning if you're fighting, you know.
Well, if you get me 3 World Series in a row, I'd be pretty happy about that.
I mean, you could tell, like, those Yankee teams, A-Rod wasn't the most popular guy in that clubhouse. But
everybody else was tight.
And, you know, when you perform, they're like, yeah, he's whatever, but he is hitting 50 home runs.
Yep. And I think I think you know, when you get to listen to him after their playing career, and mind you, I know he was just the closer, but it seemed like Mariano Rivera had such an impact on that clubhouse because his kindness and Bernie were just 2 guys. Because everyone talks about Jeter, but I don't think Jeter was an outspoken guy.
Not like that, no.
But I'm just saying, you look at that and you realize why maybe they won.
Which is so weird to think that a Panamanian closer would have that kind of effect. But he's a good guy.
Yep.
A's win game 1, 3-2. They beat Andy Messersmith. Catfish Hunter comes in to get the last out of that game, gets the save. That's October baseball for you. Game 2, once again, 3-2, this time in favor of the Dodgers. The moment in this game was in the 9th. A's had scored twice to cut the deficit to a run, had Joe Rudy on first when they brought in pinch runner Herb Washington to run. That's all the former track star did back then, was pinch run. Never had an at-bat, never played in the field. He just pinch ran. He had mixed results. Mike Marshall was on in relief. He had a good pickoff move to first for a righty. I think in a recent issue, we talked about how Vin Scully said this is not going to go well for Herb Washington. And he quickly nabbed him leaning the wrong way and picked him off, and that was it. Series tied 1-1, heading up I-5 to Oakland. So
the on that crazy thing, all 3 of those guys, Herb Washington, Steve Garvey, Mike Marshall, they all went to school together at Michigan State.
I know,
Washington and Garvey had a class, and Marshall taught a class that Washington was in. Sort of odd. And then I was reading where it said that when they picked that Washington kept taking leads, and Mike Marshall didn't show him a good move. And then when he finally showed him the great move, that he never even made it back to first. Yeah. And he was still lying on the ground, lying on the dirt when Steve Garvey waited for the tag and was running away, and he was still there.
You have one job, okay, to run, and then to get picked off is like the cardinal sin.
Yeah. Well, the other thing it makes you wonder is, like, I mean, now it doesn't matter if you've never seen the guy's movie before because you've seen it on video. You have coaches, scouts, all of them.
And they're all telling you.
It was almost like, oh, that guy doesn't have much of a move. Oh, I can get a little further. Oh, shoot.
Done.
Out.
Done. Yeah. Charlie Finley was obviously every game. He was married at the time, but he used to bring a guest with him, a very attractive guest. It was Miss California, Lucianne Buchanan. Okay, it's been a long time. You guys may not know who she is, but if you watch movies, you might know who she is. Who here's seen Trading Places? Do you remember
I raised my hand, by
Do
the
you
way.
remember the scene where Dan Aykroyd's character Winthrop was staring at the window of Billy Ray Valentine and it's raining on him? He's getting rained on.
Yeah, he's in the
He's in the mink fur and he's just, the rain's just coming down and Billy Ray's talking. There's a woman in there that's with like one of the leaders of a big stock market guy. That's Luciana Buchanan. And I think it's, if I have the quote, he says, they're going to do long-term wheat. And Billy Ray, or excuse me, Eddie Murphy says, she was a mistress at the table when Winthrop stares at Billy Ray in the rain. And judging from all the jewels around your girlfriend's neck here, I think you'll need every penny you got just to keep her happy. If you look at the movie, she's got a big scene in that part. So she was in Trading Places.
Wow.
Still.
What a just like Elliot Gould, a long credits list for Miss California.
Yeah. Yeah, and she said their relationship was completely platonic, but she was on the planes. He set her up in every hotel that he went to. So I'm sure they're just friends.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Friends with benefits is
Yes.
what they call it. Yeah.
You know, when I tell people about our podcast, I often say it's like a history of sports. We go back in time, talk about games, athletes, coaches from 50 years ago. So our next guest makes perfect sense to me. We have a sports historian, and to be more specific, the Los Angeles Dodgers team historian. But really, it's the Dodgers, because this guy knows things that happened well before the team left Brooklyn for LA. Mark Langill is his name, and he joins us from his home in Southern California. Mark, good morning. Thanks for getting up so early and talking with us today.
My pleasure. It's so great to be with you, and what a wonderful subject.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes. Well, you're the subject.
No, the team is always the subject. And
That is true.
1974, right now we're in the middle of the playoffs, and I always tell people, even if we were to win, 1974 is always going to be my favorite team, because when you're a kid, you're 8, 9 years old, and you've got the saucer eyes, and you grow up in Southern California, and your team gets to the World Series right off the bat, the very first time you follow the team, that never leaves you. That excitement, that is Dodgers and A's and Dodgers and Pirates in the LCS. When you're a kid watching that, that never leaves you.
You know, we were talking amongst ourselves a show or two ago about the choices you make in choosing your team when you're young. You did very well. The three of us, not so much. I'm an A's fan. Bill's an Angels fan. Mark is a Tigers fan, so he's doing okay right now. But the Dodgers, that was the way to go, Mark. Nice work as a 10-year-old or so.
Well, I think I was lucky right off the bat, because it's kind of like Bad News Bears. The Dodgers get to the World Series, but then they lose. I always wonder if I would have been spoiled if they win the championship in 1974. So that way I can suffer through 1977 and 78 with Reggie and the Yankees, the one-game playoff with the Astros in 1980. And so by the time they win it in 81, I'd been through enough as far as the ups and downs where you appreciate just what it takes to win a championship. And when you look at that 1981 championship, and I heard Rick Monday talking about it on the radio, when you look at that core group of players, all those veterans, that was the only championship that they ever won.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, it's so true. You know, I was, as I mentioned, a Bay Area guy. So A's, Raiders, neither of them have won in quite a long time, but the Warriors. And when they finally won it, it was more of a relief than it was this exuberant joy. I was like, oh, I finally, as an adult, get to experience what it's like to root for the champion. So I completely understand where you're coming from. You got to suffer a little bit first.
You got spoiled right off the bat if you're young enough with Rick Barry and Clifford Ray and Al Attles and winning it. You didn't know it would take forever, the Joe Barry Carroll years, before you could finally turn the page and become a contender again.
I told the story last week when we were talking about the A's. My first A's game ever was Game 3 of the 75 ALCS. It was the end, the literal end of their dynasty was my first game. So it took a while to then 89. We won't talk about the 88 World Series. I don't remember what happened that year. So
hey, it was very exciting. You had
Pretty good.
you had a 4-0 lead in the first inning of Game 1. What happened?
Mike
Oh, you're
Davis
rubbing
walked.
it in.
Everyone talks about Gibson's homer, but I remember Mike Davis walking. That's what killed me about that whole thing. But we're getting really off target.
Scott, are you still bitter about this?
Some things, don't leave. They take about 40 years, so we're still 4 more years away. So,
Hey, just to rub more salt in the wound, Scott, I was covering the '90 World Series when the Reds swept those.
Oh boy,
yeah, that was a tough one too. But we're talking Dodgers now, Mark. Okay, stay
yes.
All right.
This isn't Tiger A's talk?
Exactly.
It should be.
Exactly.
Damn.
Now, Mark, we know you are what some people call a fountain of information. And when it comes to the Dodgers, some of it what we call useless information. That's the kind I like best. So give me some useless information about that 74 Dodgers team.
Here's the great thing about 1974. You study it the last 50 years and you find little things about that series. And one of the coolest things I found out was from Steve Garvey, because from the introductions in game 1, he's looking at the third base coach and he's wondering on the introductions, why is Tommy Lasorda standing on the baseline with one shoe Adidas and the other shoe Puma? Doesn't Tommy know how to dress himself for the World Series? Well, he knew what to do for the World Series because he was getting $50 from each shoe company to wear their shoe. So a little thing like that. Tommy's only the third base coach, and already you can see it starting.
That's just being a good business person.
It is. It is.
And that is like capital U in useless information, but a great little tidbit. So let's talk a little bit about that team. You said it was your favorite because as a kid. Looking back at it as an adult, what stands out about that team?
Well, I think the personalities, because Jimmy Wynn was my favorite player. And I think if you're a kid influenced by Sports Illustrated and you see on the cover, hey, there's Jimmy Wynn, those rampaging Dodgers. So in your mind, wow, this is national news. The whole country's talking about the team. And then in August, you've got Iron Mike Marshall on the cover. That was very exciting because having read about the Dodgers as a kid, I knew they hadn't been in the World Series since 1966 and they hadn't won a championship since 1965. So 74 is really the team that I start to follow. And it's a great way to start off as a baseball fan because Hank Aaron has broken the home run record, 715 against the Dodgers. And there was this worry during the year that, yeah, they're doing well, but last year, meaning 1973, they had a lead against the Reds and the Reds overtook them. And the big day for me, the most important day, was September 15, 1974. It's a Sunday, and the Dodgers are only up by a game and a half, and they're facing the Reds that weekend. If they lose that Sunday game, that lead is cut by another game, and it's the 7th inning, and Jimmy Wynn hits a grand slam. And it's one of those, like the kid in the hospital bed, Lou Gehrig, pride of the Yankees, when your guy hits a grand slam. And it was the coolest thing because they win 7-1. They go off and win the division. But when the guy that you really follow hits a grand slam in the pennant race, that is, my personal email is winslam74@gmail.com. And, little things like that. And the funny thing about that was 20 years later, I met Jimmy Wynn and I was at an Old Timers Day luncheon. And I said, Jimmy, I was there when you hit that grand slam against the Reds. Oh, I'll never forget it. And he looked at me with a blank look and he goes, I never hit a grand slam with the Dodgers. I go, Jimmy, cornerstone to the childhood. And I recapped everything. And fortunately, it was a weekend event. So I showed him the newspaper clipping the next day. And he goes, well, what do you know? I guess I did. And that taught me a great lesson. These guys are out there. He might have only thought it was a 3-run homer or, had a headache that day, whatever. But we joked about it forever in terms of he'd call later for a Magic Johnson bobblehead and I'd give it to him and the coworkers would be like, why would you do that? They're rare. I said, when your favorite player calls and wants something, you give him whatever he wants. Mm-hmm. And how cool later in life to be able to get the Christmas card from Jimmy Wynn and everything like that. And then when you look at that team, the core, Garvey, Lopes, Russell Say, Sutton, Messersmith, so many of those players had great careers. And if you analyze that World Series, 4 of the 5 games were by scores of 3-2. So it was super close, and it also had one of the greatest defensive plays in history when Joe Ferguson cuts in front of Jimmy Wynn in game 1 on the fly with a sacrifice fly from Reggie Jackson, cuts down Sal Bando at home plate. Steve Yeager gets run over and just acts like it's no big deal, just flips the ball, to the umpire. And that was you see that, and that's the most exciting part. The exciting part that they were in the World Series. It didn't necessarily break my heart. I didn't understand as a kid. I would learn later that Mike Marshall was stubborn and didn't warm up during game 5 when there was a smoke bomb on the field and Joe Rudy sits on the first pitch, hits a homer, and they win 3-2. I'm just thinking Iron Mike, the 208 innings in relief, the Cy Young Award, everything like that. You learn later about the stubbornness, but also, he was a great pitcher. But that margin of error in 74, obviously it could have gone either way because all those games were close.
Did you know that was the start of a great period for the Dodgers? Because they were in the World Series 4 of the 8 years during that period.
Well, don't forget, it wasn't necessarily a great period because 75 and 76, coming off the high of 74, you get to see the Big Red Machine win the National League West by margins of 10 games and 20 games, and it was just driving you crazy to see people like Pedro Borbon and Will McInerney and these guys that, this pitching staff. Captain Hook's got all these relievers, and, they sweep the Yankees. They beat the Red Sox in that great 75 series. So you don't know, even when Lasorda takes over in 77, the Reds are dead. Well, it's easy to say, but you didn't know what was around the corner with Tommy. And so we had no idea 75 and 76 that around the corner would be the Big Blue Wrecking Crew. We had no idea how that would evolve.
You mentioned we had Jason Turbo on, who wrote the book Dynastic, Bombastic, Fantastic, Charlie Finley and the Swingin' A's. And that series, even though it only went 5 games, you mentioned every game, 4 of the 5 games, 3-2, tight games. In fact, in the book, it makes it clear that the A's were motivated because the Dodgers were favored in that World Series to win. And it kind of makes sense. Even though the A's were 2-time defending champions, that Dodgers team was loaded. They did not have a weakness. Their bullpen was great, starting pitching off the charts, power, speed. They had it all. Maybe one small thing, and it did come back to haunt them. They weren't great defensively yet, but what a team that was.
Well, think about this. They all got along, kumbaya, we love each other, as opposed to the dysfunctional visitors clubhouse in which Bill North and Reggie Jackson are going at it. The whole team hates Charlie Finley, the owner. And so while you've got all that chaos, you've got Kenny Holtzman, a pitcher who has a key double and a key home run. And you look at the box score and then you go, who the heck is Jim Holt? He was an outfielder and he had a key 2-run single off of Andy Messersmith in the pivotal game 4. So instead of tying the series at 2 games apiece, Jim Holt gets the hit of his career, and suddenly they're up 3-1. So you've got the dysfunction in the Oakland clubhouse, but then you've also got guys like Kenny Holtzman and Jim Holt who stepped up big for key moments, as you mentioned, in those close games.
How big of a loss? We had Tommy John on the show a few months ago. How big of a loss was him for the Dodgers to achieve what they did when they lost him during that season?
It was a big loss because he's 13-3 and he's on his way possibly to a Cy Young Award. And I always wonder, and I've always asked veterans about this, because when you look at the league championship series, Sutton and Messersmith were lights out. Sutton, they were 0-6 in Pittsburgh in 74, and they go in and they win the first 2 games. And then in game 4 of the LCS, Doug Rao, the Pirates bat him around. And so Alston, I think, wanted to go with a veteran for game 3, so that's why he goes with Al Downing. But I always wondered, because you see Rao, and he had a good regular season, and Alston bypassed him for the World Series. So you just never know how Doug Rao would have done, a lefty against a Reggie Jackson and some of those other hitters. So he goes with Downing. But that's a very good point, because people forget, Tommy John's later a 20-game winner in 77, and he wins the pennant in Philadelphia on a rainy night, game 4. But what would a healthy Tommy John have been in the 74 World Series? Because then you would have had Tommy John, Don Sutton, and Andy Messersmith, and that would be a heck of a 3 for a rotation in the World Series.
We've like we mentioned, had Tommy John as a guest. The Big Red Machine is the big rival of the Dodgers, and that team is loaded with Hall of Famers. The Dodgers are loaded with all-stars, guys who maybe just didn't play long enough, or whatever the case may be, not a bunch of Hall of Famers. Make the case for Tommy John being in Cooperstown.
Well, Tommy John, I think you're going to see him in Cooperstown next year, because as the years pass and you see people throwing a parade for pitchers that, maybe go 4 or 5 innings, back in the day, as far as Tommy John and that era in the 1970s, 288 wins. And it's just, I think especially when you're comparing, if Jim Cott's going to be in now, then you can do Tommy John. And you think about this, Tommy John misses half of 74, and then he misses all of 75. So he comes back in 76 and he's 10-10. Then he's a 20-game winner in 77. And then the Dodgers decide, well, maybe 32, 33. We don't want to go multi-year. The Yankees scoop him up. But that year and a half that he's off, if he's at 288 wins, he's guaranteed to have 300 wins. And so I think you just have to look at that body of work. And he also talks about Alston in that 75 season, or 76 season. He sort of had the kid gloves on. He was kind of the first couple months. It was like, I don't want anything to happen to you. I don't want anything to happen to you. And Tommy felt like there was a black cloud over him in terms of just let me pitch. And so he's agonizingly close to 300. And I think had he reached 300, he would have been a Hall of Famer long ago. So definitely, I think you'll see Tommy John get to the Hall of Fame next year, because, as I say, the modern day, you're not going to see, it's very hard for it to imagine a starting pitcher get 250 wins and knocking on the door for 300. I think Tommy John, especially because of being a pioneer too, as far as that surgery, I think he's got a very good chance next year for the Veterans Committee.
Yeah, it's very ironic that he misses those 12 wins because of what turned out to be Tommy John surgery. So it wasn't like he pulled a calf or something. He had this, as you mentioned, pioneering procedure between him and Dr. Job that may have caused him all this waiting to get into Cooperstown.
And think about the things you take for granted. You look at Sutton's record, you look at Tommy John, you look at all those workhorses of the 1970s. You look at the complete games, you look at the shutouts. Those things just aren't done anymore. It's now by committee as far as a bullpen for some games, but with pitch counts and everything like that, you're not going to see somebody knocking on the door with 300 innings anymore. But back in the day, as far as 60s, 70s, 80s, and obviously this is the theme of the podcast, back in the day, you need to acknowledge as far as just what workhorses these guys were.
Was 1974 maybe one of the pinnacles of the game? Football had not yet passed it. Because like I say, we've had Ron Say, we've had Tommy John, we've had Jim Cott on the show, and there was something special about baseball back in that era.
Well, think about 1974. You've got Hank Aaron, you've got the national attention, but this is also sort of this is right before free agency. So this is the last era where all the players stay together. Now, as a fan, you could be nostalgic about that and say, isn't that great they're all together? The players would say, yeah, the reserve clause. That's why we were together. And so from a fan standpoint, that's when you could get the trading cards, and guys really didn't move around. The Catfish Hunter decision, the Andy Messersmith, Dave McNally decision. Once 75 hits, then you start to see the free agency. They had already had arbitration starting in 73, but that didn't affect player movement. So 74 is kind of like the last golden era. And plus, you also think back then they'd have World Series games in the daytime. And so it was a different time in terms of before everything went to night games. 74, 75, that's really the last era when you had those teams staying together. And then look at the A's of the 1975. After that, Finley thought they had to break up, and he tries to sell Vita Blue and get rid of some of his players and get what he can. But 74, 75, that's when you still had the core of those great teams together.
Mark, I just want to go back just a little bit, because to me, I read a little bit about you. So in 1972, you go to your first game. you're watching the team and you fall in love with the team, and then later on you're working with them. How wonderful of a transition was that to go from a kid that is on the field watching, and then all of a sudden you're seeing everything from the inside?
It's a surreal moment. And I think the thing that really helps you, I joke, I say, how do you become team historian? Don't hit the ball in Little League and you're well on your way. And I use that, I get the laugh, but I think that's absolutely important, because if you know at age 7 that you're washed up, that this isn't going to be your route as a player, but you still enjoy the atmosphere, you still enjoy everything about it. I think that's the key, because I never had my heart broken in high school or college as far as, oh, if only I could have been a pro player or anything like that. I knew what my role was as far as appreciating what was going on the field. I was a great reader as a kid, so I knew, all the history and everything like that. I wanted to be a sports writer. Pasadena Star News, I covered the team for 6 years, and it's just a surreal moment, because you start in 1994, and when you're in the playoffs, when you're talking to players, even when you walk into the stadium, it's just kind of like, when you hear Wake Up the Echoes, if you're talking about Notre Dame or a facility where, just imagine, I grew up in this ballpark. That was the cool thing, as far as this ballpark still looks like the one from my childhood, but everything evolves. It's not just some sort of relic. They've put in so much money to be able to develop the ballpark and improve the franchise and the facilities. And I've just always enjoyed it. I've never had a bad day at work. I don't even like to say the word work, because people just laugh at me in terms of, you absolutely enjoy what you do. And just last week, somebody had said that they were going to be in, I said, where are you sitting? And they said 44 field, row L. And I cracked up, because I said 44M, seat 1 is my very first game when I was a kid. And my family just shakes their heads going, that's his idea of tracing his roots, knowing exactly where he was for his very first game. And then if you think about it too, I'm born opening day 1965. And as a kid, I thought that was the neatest thing. The home opener of a championship year, that's stuff you can't plan. But I've just always been so comfortable around the ballpark, and to listen to other people's stories, to hear from the players, to hear from Vin Scully, the other broadcasters. I've just been truly blessed to be able to do this. I as I say, never a bad day, and it's the people that you enjoy. The results, you win, you lose. My job wouldn't change if we were in 4th place or if we hadn't, won a pennant in 10 years. That doesn't change. It's the ballpark atmosphere, and I always remember what it was like growing up as a kid in the left field pavilion. It was just the most exciting time. And I'm 59 years old, and it feels like I have 259 years of memories, because I've just been so fortunate with everything that's been brought upon me as far as people's reminiscence and things that I've been able to witness firsthand. I'm truly lucky.
You're 59, and the Dodgers won the World Series in 59, so maybe there's something symbolic for this year.
You never know. 59, they lose the first game 11-0 at Chicago, and Don Drysdale gets on the bus and says, "Is that all they got?" And then they win 4 of the next 5 games. So those are like triggers. You talk about something, and you all of a sudden know some little thing about the World Series. Someone will say something, and then something will pop into your head relating to that. And it's just like a matrix. It just never ends. And I just absolutely love it.
You mentioned, Mark, about being that 7, 8, 9-year-old kid and realizing this is not my future on the field. And I think all 3 of us can relate to that. All played, but just not very well, but just loved it. And so to realize, I'm the same boat, man. My uncles used to ask me when I was 6 years old, what do you want to do? And I'd be like, something in sports. And it never wavered. So I can really relate to that passion that you had. Was it specifically for you for baseball, or did you love them all?
I love the storylines. And so, when you're a kid, you follow the Rams because they're local, and you can still see Bobby Bryant running back a blocked Tom Dempsey field goal 90 yards the other direction. You can see Chuck Knox trying to win the big one for the Lakers. You knew that they had won the championship in 72. But then, when you start to sort of follow at the Kareem years before Magic, it was just more of the storylines. But Dodgers was always the most important thing. I think because of Scully, and I think just because of the atmosphere. I'd be able to go to games. My mom could take my sister and I on a Sunday. You'd pack up all your stuff and you'd have your stats and autograph Sunday and things like that. Those are the things that are so precious because you don't realize at the time that you're going to have those memories for the next half century.
I just remember back a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to talk with Vince Scully for about a half hour, and you just mentioned him. What was it like to meet him and spend time around him?
It was surreal at first, but then you realize that he just wanted to be treated like anybody else. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. And I think that people would be shocked that if you were in the booth and he prepared to the level where if you were watching a broadcast behind the scenes in the booth, you'd go, oh my goodness, he used maybe 0.5% of his research. And you realize that was a spice and not a crutch. And so he spontaneously wanted to be able to talk about what was going on the field. But let's say the third baseman, had a dog named Spot, and in the fourth grade, he had it all ready to go, but he wasn't going to force it. But he had everything ready to go. I remember when he was talking about doing football for CBS, and they were going to have Sonny Jurgensen as a color commentator. And somebody said, "Hey, Vin, you got a quarterback as a color guy. Why would you hire Jack Faulkner of the Rams to teach you about football, just the way he hired a tennis coach to teach him about tennis and everything like that?" And he said, it's a lot easier to ask the question if you already know the answer. And so he was like that. And I asked him once, I said, what's your secret? I mean, in terms of what's your philosophy? He quotes Sir Laurence Olivier. He says, have the humility to prepare and the confidence to pull it off. So that was the thing with Vinny, the pro's pro. It was such a privilege to know him, but also just to see him work behind the scenes. Just imagine you got a million people every night hanging on your every word. He said he would prepare as a defense mechanism because he didn't want to all of a sudden see somebody at the plate and suddenly not know who they were.
Did you have a mentor or anyone that you got looked up to that helped you along?
Couple. There was Pasadena Star News. Joe Hendrickson was a longtime sports editor, and he had covered the Rose Bowl, and I always appreciated that local history. I was very well versed, on the Rose Bowl as well, as far as Roy Regals and all the because remember, for a Rose Bowl, you've only got maybe 1 or 2 times that a player can play in it. Maybe they'd repeat, but it wasn't like a dynasty. It would be different storylines throughout the years. And the Roy Regals story always fascinated me. And 60 years later, I ended up meeting Roy Regals, the Cal center that ran the wrong way, New Year's Day 1929, Cal versus Georgia Tech. And then Matt McHale was a reporter for the Pasadena Star News, and he was a great mentor as well, as far as, you're young and he sort of shows you the ropes on the beat and everything like that. But everybody around me, as far as whether at the newspaper or, in a professional sense, they were always encouraging. And that was the nice thing. And I think they sort of laughed too that, why does this guy know about the 1903 World Series? Or, why would he know about, Havlicek stole the ball or any of those sports iconic moments from, way before he was born.
I imagine being a historian means research and research. And when you're done, some more research followed by some research. Is it ever over? I mean, do you just keep digging and digging and digging?
No, not at all. When the Dodgers were forced into game 5 for the division series, you're obviously thinking back to 1981 when they fell 2 games behind against the Astros and came back. You think about 2021 when they won game 5, and that was the first time that they had a Dodgers-Giants matchup in the playoffs, because obviously 51 and 62 were the regular season. So there are triggers like that as well, as far as what the themes are. When it came to a close pennant race at the end of the regular season, you think about Steve Finley's walk-off grand slam, second to last day of the season 20 years ago in 2004. So a lot of times you'll do research, but it has to have sort of a focus in terms of what are we looking at? What's the anniversary coming up? For example, 50 years, 1974. So you want to have a theme as well. The other thing too, I never try to give my opinion as far as what I either think's going to happen or who was a better player, because you have to go back to the days when you're a lousy little league player. I'm not going to sit in judgment and say, so and so is better than so and so, because I still have no idea how to throw a curveball or how to read the stitches on a ball or anything like that. So the book work, the library stuff, I'm good at. I know my place as far as to be able to compare statistics relatively in history, but there's a difference between that and saying that one ball player is better than another one. All you can really do is talk to their peers and find out what they have to say.
Yeah, the big thing always is comparing players from different eras. It's a fun topic for sports talk radio, but it's endless, and there's no right answer ever.
No, and look at Ohtani. I mean, it's video game numbers, but you have to put it into context as far as, would he have as many stolen bases if he wasn't a DH? Think about next year if he pitches, what that's going to look like. But you just have to appreciate in the moment. All those home runs, the 54 home runs, the going for 50-50, that would have meant, and it turned out to be, you break Sean Green's record as you become the first 50-50 guy in Major League Baseball. So it wasn't just trying to be the first 50-50 guy. No Dodger had ever hit 50 home runs. And so in that context of joining the National League in 1890, then you can really be able to put some weight behind the history as far as if somebody sets a record, you can really put into context what that means.
Now, I know that you talked about meeting Jimmy Wynn. Is there a nowadays or recently been someone that's walked in, former Dodger, that you get sort of tongue-tied? Because I can say the times I've met certain guys, I'm like all nervous. Is there anything like a guy like that for you?
I think it was in the beginning for Vin, and then I think it's just a matter of that's a very good question. I think once you meet Vinny, then everybody else, it's you're at ease with them. And I think the other thing too is you learn at a very young age. It doesn't matter how famous they are or sport or anything like that. You want to treat them just like anyone else and make them comfortable, especially if you're going to interview them, because you want to find out about them. And so, you don't want to necessarily say, like if I'm doing a program with the players and it's during the season, I'll never ask, hey, do you think he'll hit 40 homers this year? Do you think the team will do well? It's more, okay, go back to your childhood. What got you going and everything like that. So that way you can just ease into a conversation. So I do remember, though, one time Bill Russell, the great NBA player, and Tommy Hawkins, who originally hired me, he was VP of communications. He had played with Bill Russell. And so I went to a book signing. And, Bill Russell was very private and everything like that. And I must have had a look on my face like I was about to faint or something. And he goes, "Are you okay?" And, because you just want to be respectful of him. And we had a great conversation because we talked about Tommy Hawkins. And one of his favorite stories was Tommy Hawkins going up to Bill Russell. And Bill Russell said, "Don't try that jump shot of yours." And Tommy Hawkins said, "I don't have a jump shot." And, to try to make Bill Russell laugh before the game. So I wouldn't say you're in awe of anyone because you appreciate them. But if you're going to communicate with them or interview them, you want to make them as relaxed as possible. And that way, if they're relaxed and they know that you're not out to get them, then you're going to get some really good stories.
You mentioned Tommy Hawkins. We have something in common. He was my first mentor. I worked at KBC Radio, nicest guy in the world. And he invited me to go to Dodger Stadium with him and his son. And it was Fernando's first full rookie year. And so we're down on the field and we go into Lasorda's clubhouse and Don Rickles is standing there doing stand-up comedy. And I thought, oh, this is the way it always is. There's an entertainer in Tommy's, office all the time. But yeah, Tommy, just such a great guy, and I miss him.
Well, Tommy is amazing because he gave my nephew the Facts of Life speech at age 7. And this was in 2006. And I said, I introduced him and he goes, "Michael, you look like a fine young man. I want you to always remember one thing." And I thought, uh-oh, what's he going to tell a 7-year-old? He goes, "Always stand in the middle of the photo so they can't crop you out." And my nephew's like, "What does that mean, Uncle?" I said, "I'll tell you later." So, Tommy was quite the character. And you mentioned Rickles. Rickles actually in 77 in the middle of the pennant race around September 15th actually went to the mound to make a pitching change because the games weren't televised back then. And Tommy's feeling his oats because he's up by about 10 in the division. Rickles has a warm-up jacket on, and Elias Sosa's the pitcher. And he says, "You're not supposed to be out here." And at that point, Rickles is panicking. He doesn't know what to do. So Wendelstedt, the umpire, comes out and says, "Hey, Don, what's up?" And he goes, "If you can bail me out of this," because Wendelstedt wanted to go to Rickles' show in Vegas the next week, and it was sold out. He goes, "You get me out of this, I'll give you a front row seat." And so, but I mean, and then Lasorda said, "Yeah, I got in trouble for that one because Peter called down and said, we can't have Don Rickles making a pitching change in the middle of a major league game, Tommy."
That's great.
That's fantastic. I'm surprised he didn't start insulting Elias Sosa.
He was enjoying himself, and Tommy that very first year, having, and you said the entertainment and everything. And here's the genius about Tommy. Tommy, everybody calls him a clown and everything like that. They lose that first game of the 77 playoffs against the Phillies. Game 2, he has a guest speaker. Now remember, this is best of 5. He's already lost the home field advantage. And in walks Rickles, and he does his act for 20 minutes, going up and down the clubhouse, ripping every guy, and it relaxed them. It loosened them up. But Tommy took a big risk because what if he loses that game and it gets out that he had Rickles talk to the team? They won the next 3. Last game 4 in Philadelphia, they win the pennant. But that was the genius of Tommy. He would do anything to motivate the team.
Yeah, that's what he was doing in 81. So he would keep bringing him back just to do, like, once in a while, do the shtick for the players, but also all the reporters to entertain them.
Absolutely. And Tommy got mad opening day 77 when he's got Sinatra around and he's introducing them, and all the players are going, "I'm sorry, who? I didn't catch the name." And Tommy's like, "Knock it off, knock it off."
So we do a segment here it's a trivia segment called 50-50. True or false? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a big Dodger fan going all the way back to when he was a little boy.
That's absolutely true. He's born the day after Jackie makes his debut. His mother sews a bee on his sweater, and at age 7, he goes to Ebbets Field and he takes pictures. And later, when Duke Snider has his number retired in 1980, Kareem gets it signed. And for both of them, that was the big day, Old Timers Day 1980. Kareem gets to meet his hero. So absolutely true.
Yeah, I think he knew that one, Mark.
No, but what's so funny is I remember him talking about his grandmother taking him as a little kid to Ebbets Field to Dodger games. And then there's a picture, I want to say in the late 70s, where he's taking batting practice at Dodger Stadium. And man, the strike zone he had, I mean, that was a picture. I'd be like, I could throw it anywhere.
He did the Hollywood Star games too, so it could have been from Hollywood Stars as well.
So let me see if I can test you one more time.
Okay.
The very first Dodger game I ever went to when I moved from Chicago, 1968, it had to have been either August or September. Don Drysdale starting against Ray Sadecki, Dodgers Giants. It's the year of Drysdale's scoreless streak.
Yeah, but Bob Gibson at 1.12.
Right. So I remember the game specifically because it was not a shutout. It was a high-scoring game. Any recollections of that game, or that just too obscure?
Well, no recollections of that month because you saw one of Drysdale's last games as far as, because by that time the arm's starting to go, and by 69 he retires in August. So he's got the year of the pitcher, but don't forget in 68 he's got that streak. But
right.
he's only 14-12 that year. And the Giants, poor Herman Franks, that's 4 consecutive second place finishes. So the Dodgers had their little peaks, and that's the end of the little Giants dynasty with Herman Franks because, then they go to the Desert Fox in 69.
I just remember the final score is 9-8. I can't even remember which team won. And Ron Fairley had a solo homer in the 9th. And I don't even remember which team he was on because I think he played for both.
Well, Fairley gets traded to the Expos along with Maury Wills in the Manny Mota deal in June of 69. So that was his last season with the Dodgers.
So he hit the
full
solo
season.
homer.
Yeah. But in 68, you got Forsythe at shortstop, you got Popovich, nothing's happening. So I don't think anybody recalls anything about it after that Dodger streak. There's really nothing to remember
right.
about 68 for both the Dodgers and the Giants.
You know, Mark, I've gone most of my life saying things and people go, how do you know that? And now I'm on the opposite end of that.
See? Exactly.
Going, oh, that's what people have been saying to me all these years, because your recollection, my goodness, impressive. And you know, we made fun about it being useless information. I think it's the key to life for us because it just kept us going and going and going. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and being with us today.
It's my pleasure, and just know that the family will tell you that he doesn't know how to turn on an oven or operate a garden hose. So, you know, if there are some major holes in my game, but fortunately, this the stuff that we've been talking about, this is the fun stuff that I've had for over a half century.
It's the most important stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Hey, you're a charter member of the Past Our Prime Club, because we're taking members where we can get them. So thank you very much. David McCullough has nothing on you as far as I'm concerned. So and real briefly, we know that you're in a fight right now and having some health issues. We're pulling for you, and lots of people that you have never met are pulling for you. So hang in there, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that. And what better medicine to be able to be at the ballpark doing something you love?
Yes. Enjoy Game 5.
Thank you.
Be well, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was great, wasn't it, guys?
That was fantastic.
Someone that you just don't know what you're going to get. First of all, whenever you get someone that's not used to being on the end of the questions, you don't know what kind of sound bites they're going to give you. And man,
we could have gone all day.
Right?
Right.
I mean,
I had so many dates. I remember October 2nd, 1977. I was going to ask him that. No, he'd probably say, yeah, Dusty Baker with the home run to make it 30 home runs. Because I used to listen to Dodger games all the time.
Yeah.
Just so cool. And Mark's recollection, because Mark knows everything about these things. And for him to go, yeah. And he went through the whole lineup for the Dodgers there in 68. And I'm thinking, wow.
And I thought my trivia knowledge was so good and my historical knowledge, but I'm like a minor leaguer and he's like a Hall of Famer compared to me.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking, Mark, is that when people ask me questions, I often go, I think it's about, I don't know. Not the way I used to know.
Right.
And like he's like, oh yeah, that was when Maury Wills and Ron Fairley got traded for blah 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 on June 29th, 19. I'm like, my goodness, it's just, you know,
it's almost like the ball players we talked to that can go back and go, oh yeah, 1971, it was the third quarter, and then I fouled him on his right wrist, and you're like, how'd you know, with 3 seconds left on the clock, and I'm like, how do you, you know, that recollection is amazing.
Great, that was a lot of fun.
All right, that's enough baseball for this time. Let's move on, talk a little college football. Ohio State may be number one, but don't tell Michigan. The Buckeyes, in front of over 87,000 fans, destroyed Wisconsin 52-7. They were awesome, said Wisconsin coach John Jardine. They're a great football team. There's no other way to say it. Since I've been here, this is the best football team we've ever met. So...
well, you know, they were undefeated, you know, when they got to the Ohio State game, Michigan. They were 10-0, and that was a great game. They actually led that game 10-0 in the first quarter, and then Ohio State came back, took a 12-10 lead, and Michigan had a chance to win it, but they missed a short field goal. So their only loss was the 12-10 game. So these were two of the top teams in the country, but unfortunately, someone has to win the Big Ten, and someone has to take the loss.
And back then, the second place team, no bowl game.
Which sucked.
It was win or nothing.
But this is what's so weird about the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. So we all know I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, right?
You?
I know, hard to believe. So when I first saw my first Michigan-Ohio State game, I was like, you would think I'd be rooting for Michigan. Michigan, you know, with the Tigers. Michigan wears blue. But for some reason, I was enamored with the Ohio State scarlet, red, and silver uniforms. So I started rooting for Ohio State, not Michigan. It makes no sense.
Well, your choices for teams makes no sense.
Yeah, and you're an enigma wrapped in a riddle.
I am.
Yeah. So everyone thought Ohio State was the team to beat, but Michigan had other thoughts. In '73, they and Ohio State tied 10-10. Both teams finished with just that tie, but the Big Ten voted that Ohio State would represent the conference in the Rose Bowl. Michigan would go home. The tie-breaking vote was Michigan State Athletic Director Bert Smith. Michigan quarterback Dennis Franklin had broken his collarbone, and the Big Ten athletic directors wanted a Rose Bowl win after 4 straight losses, Smith proving to be the deciding vote. So Michigan led Michigan State that week, 21-0, ends up winning 21-7. So a little bad blood. Bo Schembechler thought that was ridiculous. Why are you punishing the entire team because the quarterback got injured? So I'll always be outspoken by Frank Robinson. Yes, he wrote this article with the help of Roy Blunt Jr. He's about to become the first black manager in baseball, player manager as it is, for the Cleveland Indians. Cleveland GM Jack Segge said, and when I say in first person, it's because Frank wrote this, said, I was the type of person the Indians wanted. I'm an objective person, one who likes to talk things out personally with ball players, black, white, or Latin. I'm not going to manage according to race. Robbie thought he might get the job when he was playing for the Angels, that he might become a player manager there. They fired Bobby Winkles, and they hired Dick Williams to replace him instead. Robinson had no problem with that. He said, when there's a Dick Williams out there, even I would hire Dick Williams. So he understood that. So then he was looking to have a trade to where there would be a team that might use him in both capacity. He thought he had a deal worked out to the Yankees, which is odd because Bill Verdon wins the 1974 Manager of the Year, and the Yankees played very well that year. But he thought he had a deal worked out to go to the Yankees, but they wouldn't guarantee where he would be in the following season, going into the 75 season. So he vetoed that one. Then he thought he was going to Boston. That didn't happen. Red Sox wanted too much. So he ends up going to Cleveland and becoming the first black manager in baseball.
I remember very vividly. I remember that it was his first game. And, it wasn't just he was the Indians manager from 74 to 76, or the 75 and 76 seasons. But, he ended up having a long career managing the Giants, the Orioles, the Expos/Nats.
Yeah.
Never made the playoffs.
Never
made the playoffs.
I know.
Never made it. He only finished over 500 8 times.
He says, I am black and I don't ignore that fact, but I'm not going out there as a black manager. I'm going out there to manage. Judge me by how I do my job. If I don't do it, then fire me. Mm-hmm. They fired him 57 games into the 1977 season. So, but like you said, long career. Maybe not the success, like we mentioned, no playoff runs, but to a man, the respect. Everybody respected Frank Robinson,
and he kicked open a door. He was the first black manager.
Right. So your Dusty Bakers,
yes,
right. Your Dave Martinez's, all those
Ron
managers
Washington.
Now of color. It was bound to happen, and they picked a good guy, strong, tough man.
Yep. And I liked the Indians growing up a lot because I liked Buddy Bell. I got to watch him every year when we go to Ohio, and so when they named a manager, I know it was he's a black man. I just wanted the Indians to win. I never thought about the color wise. I just thought, man, I just want them to win because I loved Buddy Bell's fire on the field.
Yeah. My first memory of Frank Robinson was with the Orioles. I never knew him when he was with the Reds, but they also had Brooks Robinson, and I first thought they were brothers.
Yeah.
That's I agree.
Sure, they were like stepbrothers.
Yeah, they were brothers on the field.
Catalina. Oh, sorry.
Right? No. Off the line and into the chips, the 74-75 preview of hockey, NHL, and WHA, fresh off their series against the Soviets, in which they won once and tied 3 times in 8 contests. Now, that was the Arrows that did that? Did they play? Yeah. So that was actually considered good, right?
Yeah.
Taking the, competing with the Russians who were head and shoulders the class of the hockey in the international way. Mm-hmm. Flyers won it all in 74. They're the first Stanley Cup ever, and they had much of that same team back to defend the cup, including Bernie Perrant, who had another spectacular season coming up.
Bobby Clark,
yeah. New Bruins coach Don Cherry says, everything is thinking it, so I'll say it. We should win it all. If we don't, then I have done something wrong. I guess he did something wrong. Goaltender Bernie Perrant for the Flyers. We mentioned this when we talked to Bernie. Started 73 games the year before. Unheard of, Billy.
Yeah.
This season, the goal is for him to start 50 to 55 games. I think he was in the 60s.
And then the next year he hurt his back, and they might have won 3 in a row.
And he played like
very
less
few
than
games.
10 games.
Yeah. Yep.
But the NHL has a new lineup, and their conferences and divisions are crazy. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so first of all, it makes sense. Like the WHA had an East and a West.
Right.
That makes sense. Even a North and a South is fine. No, so they have 2 conferences and then 2 divisions within each conference. So the conferences are named after, Clarence Campbell, but the other one's the Prince of Wales Conference. Yes. Don't get it. In the Clarence Campbell Conference, you have the Lester Patrick Division and the Conn Smythe Division. And in the Prince of Wales Conference, you have the James Norris Division and the Charles F. Adams Division. And then the way these divisions are set up, like the James Norris Division in the Prince of Wales Conference has the Kings, and who would they be playing against? Like the Seals, maybe, That would make sense. No. They've got the Detroit Red Wings, the Montreal Canadiens, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Washington. It's like...
they're on the road.
Yes. It's
all
like,
the time.
They're complaining right now about teams on the West Coast having to play in the Big Ten and all the travel. This is crazier.
Yeah, they must have gone on long road trips.
Yes.
I think back then they did do this. I think they did go to like Montreal and play twice.
Yeah.
They didn't go and just play one time.
I don't know. I don't know how you sit in an NHL office and go, we're hitting the Kings. Oh, put them in with Detroit and Pittsburgh and
Maybe
Washington.
They just
no sense.
Names out of a hat or something.
I mean, even if you look around, Kansas City would make sense. And in the Adams division, Boston, Buffalo, Toronto, and California.
Yeah.
What here doesn't fit?
Right?
And couldn't they just trade the two?
Yeah, let's throw Toronto over to where Kansas, Vancouver is.
Yeah. And Toronto and Kings were a big rivalry for me when I was growing up because I played them a lot and I enjoyed the two guys on Toronto.
Those names, you're right, because for forever, those names, the Campbell Conference and the Prince of Wales Conference, they lasted for forever.
And the Norris, that's a trophy now.
Right. So
and the Adams is a trophy.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm saying they took the conferences and made the Adams the coach
of the year.
But
nobody ever knew when they were like, oh, yeah, I'm in the Campbell Conference. I was like, okay, what does that mean?
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Who are you?
The NFL was weird, too, for a while around the same time, a little bit earlier. They had the Capital Division, the Century Division. It was just really weird. Come on, just East-West.
Just make it easy for people.
It's makes no sense.
Because if I hear AFC North, geographically it helps you.
Well, I mean, in baseball, you had the Reds, Cincinnati Reds, and Atlanta Braves in the West, which is like a little weird. But,
and then they finally figured it out as well. So,
but
Billy,
there were a couple interesting things.
Yeah,
they're the California Golden Seals. Who were they owned by? Charlie Finley.
That's right.
Until the NHL bought them out. Then they moved to Cleveland. Then the Barons would eventually merge with the Minnesota North Stars. Yes, the Barons. Oh. And then they would eventually become the Dallas Stars. So from California to Cleveland to Minnesota, which I loved the North Stars, and then they became the Stars.
If you can't make it in Minnesota,
that's what I'm saying.
NHL team, there's something wrong.
I think that's where Mike Modano started, and he ended in Dallas. And the NHL also had the Kansas City Scouts, which I thought Kansas City's a good market. They ended up going to Colorado, becoming the Colorado Rockies, which for a Kings fan was fantastic because the Rockies sucked more than the Kings. So when they'd come to play, the Kings usually get lit up. No. They'd win games like 10-3, 9-4, so it was great. But they ended up moving from Colorado, obviously not Colorado being the Rockies. They moved to New Jersey to become the Devils, which are now a great franchise.
Yeah.
3-time Stanley Cup winner.
So let me get this straight. Kansas City goes to Colorado.
Yes.
That Colorado then goes to New Jersey.
Yes.
And then
Quebec.
Expansion. Oh, Quebec comes
went
to
Colorado and became the Avalanche.
Because now
the Rockies are baseball.
Right.
So,
but Colorado or Denver is a good hockey town.
It is.
And the University of Denver is a very good hockey program.
And the NHL's considering going back to Atlanta for the third time.
Yeah.
Why
not go to Kansas City?
Yeah, exactly.
Look at how
Why don't you go to Birmingham, which we talked about being an up-and-coming city.
And Billy, in the WHA, just like in the NHL, the Houston Aeros won it all the year prior, and they're the favorites to do it again this year.
And
How
they did.
come?
Because Gordie Howe and his sons Mark and Marty. I mean, Gordie Howe had 99 points. Well, the three combined for 209 points that year.
Oh my gosh!
That's excuse me, 209. So yeah, that's quite
Gretzky-like.
impressive.
Yeah.
Yes. I only cared because they had Terry Ruskowski, and he played for the Kings in the '80s. And when Rusky was on the ice, there were people going down. So I like that. Terry Ruskowski was there. I love that guy.
Another little hockey thing here, that an article called "The Eagle and His Fat Flock." It's on a guy named Alan Eagleson. He's the president of the NHL Players Association, a Canadian lawyer. In 1958, in the town of Oakville, Ontario, he took on an assault case while sporting a bulging black eye and 2 facial gashes from lacrosse. When he informed the court that he represented the accused, the judge said, "You look like the victim." So he was a tough guy. In 1967, when the Players Association was formed, the average NHL player's salary was $15,000. Today, being 1974, it's $60,000. So he had quadrupled that. And he made a name for himself in the 60s. And one of his first guys that he signed, Billy?
Bobby Orr.
Yeah.
He went to the Bruins and asked for a contract of annually $50,000. They laughed at him. Oh, yeah, sure. A year later, they signed him for $40,000.
Yeah, they offered 10, and they were like, "And we're not budging."
Yeah, we're not budging.
And he was like, "Oh, okay, then we'll talk to you."
Yep.
And he had no leverage.
None.
And Bobby just sat and sat and sat, and he had been setting all these records in junior leagues.
Yep. You don't realize, and I think, did you read it? Well, was it that Bobby Orr he won the scoring title like 3 times. It just was an amazing player that most of us never really got to see. Just him amazing on the ice.
Yeah. When he finally signed the deal, Eagleson said, "Well, we've settled the damn thing. Let's shake hands, take pictures, and open the champagne." And the GM of the Bruins said, "Champagne? There's no champagne, no press conference, nothing." He opened a can of soda pop and poured it into 5 glasses so each have a drink. Here was Bobby Orr, a little Moses, coming to lead the Bruins to the promised land, and they were too tight to spend 50 cents on him. So you could see that the Bruins were counting every penny, and probably, not probably, they didn't know what they had just done. They had just signed literally a savior.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. A guy that's still at the face of the franchise all the years later. But then things went wrong.
Yes.
Oh, for Eagleson, yes.
Embezzled money.
Disbarred.
Ended up going to prison and stepped out of the Hall of Fame because he was in the Hall of Fame as a builder. And then even worse, Bobby Orr cut him out of his life and never talked to him again. Never. They just became, Bobby Orr said, I want nothing to do with him. Done. Eagleson is still alive.
Interesting story.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
All right, college football. Cal beats Oregon 40-10 behind Chuck Muncie's 126 yards rushing.
I love Muncie.
And Steve Bartkowski throwing for 183 yards and 2 TDs. Big year for Bartkowski, wasn't it, guys?
Yeah, didn't he become the #1 draft pick after that?
He sure did.
Yeah.
Atlanta Falcons.
That's right.
Who represented
Who was
him?
by Lee Steinberg.
That's right.
Who happened to be a
Guest on the show.
There you go. Thank you, Mark. See?
And a friend of Bartkowski's who called him up and said, "Hey,
That's
I
right.
need you to represent me." And
That's
Steinberg
right.
was like, okay,
Never
I
done
guess."
that.
His first client. A big game between Texas and Oklahoma, fourth quarter, tied at 13, 4th and 1 from their own 49-yard line for the Longhorns, who give it to freshman running back Earl Campbell. He gets the first down, but Leroy Selman strips him of the ball. Sooners recover, drive down the field, kick a field goal, win 16-13. So a couple Hall of Famers there.
Exactly. And Leroy Selman was good.
So good stuff. All right, let's talk some women's golf and one of the all-time greats, Joanne Carner. And in 74, Big Mama, as she was affectionately known, was the LPGA Player of the Year, winning 6 tournaments. She played in 26 for the year, was trying to get over the $100,000 mark in earnings. That's quite a change from her just a few years back. She was a national champion 6 times as an amateur, and for years she would say, I'm not turning pro. I don't want to have that schedule, because she and her husband, they like to just kind of drive around and play golf and go fishing.
And they live in an RV.
Yeah.
That's the greatest thing. They lived in an Airstream trailer, like 5 years in the Airstream trailer.
Just drove all around.
Yeah.
She said there were 2 reasons. One, it's not fun. to not join the tour. And 2, the pros were not all that they were cracked up to be. Oh, and 3, she and 9 other amateurs could beat any 10 pros any day. Once in 1969, she even won a tournament, but she was like, I don't want the prize money. Give it to the other girls. So she was a character.
Yeah.
And in 1969, she's puts down her fishing pole. She's Rookie of the Year in 70. She struggles the next 3 years, winning just twice in 71. But in 74, she gets a pep talk from somebody and really kind of helps her out.
It's another A's connection.
Right.
She had a talk with Billy Martin, the manager of the A's at one point. He sat down and talked about the mental part of the game and how to win and how to get herself prepared. And I guess they talked late into the evening one night. So they were actually good friends. And I don't know, when I think of Joanne Carner, I don't think Billy Martin. It's sort of an odd pairing.
I mean, 43 OPG wins, the World Golf Hall of Fame.
I just like the nickname Big Mama.
Big Mama.
Right.
Because we used to do that. Someone woke up the mama.
That's right. I don't picture her. I picture.
Yeah, I'd be saying that every day.
But Billy, if there was one thing Billy could do for people, he could get the best out of them.
Yeah.
So it's not that surprising that he would have any kind of effect on her. I'm not saying he even did, but
it's the fact that he's in her life.
She did kind of take off from that point on.
She did.
Right.
But that's not bad to have that guy on speed dial, so to speak.
No,
if you needed a little pep talk,
Yeah.
he'd give it to you straight.
A team with real cheek, NFL. For years, the Cardinals fans thought the slogan of the team was "For God, for country, and for 9-1," as in 4 wins, 9 losses, and a tie. But this year, they just beat the Cowboys 31-28. Do you remember that one, Mark?
Vaguely. The 74 season was the first time I'd watched the Cowboys where they didn't make the playoffs. But I always remember when they played the Cardinals like to wear white at home at that stage. So the Cowboys got to wear their blue jerseys, which they hardly ever did. So I always remember it. But the picture they have here is showing a Cardinal player scoring a touchdown. He was a very famous tight end for the Cardinals, Hall of Famer by the name of Jackie Smith.
Don't talk about it, Mark.
But what Cowboy fans remember is he later would play for the Cowboys, and he dropped that pass in the end zone against the Steelers in the Super Bowl. And the Cowboys they had to settle for field goal, and they lost that game by 4 points.
Yes, they did.
He catches that ball. We might have had an overtime.
Jackie Smith must be the sickest man alive.
But he was a great player, but people would just talk about that one play. Yeah.
It's amazing how one play can take your whole career and make it, inconsequential.
It was a seesaw affair against the Cowboys, tied at 28 in the 4th. Terry Metcalf took a Dallas squib kick at his 10 and returned it 56 yards to the Cowboys' 34. They kick a field goal a few minutes later and win 31-28 to get to 5-0.
Well, Dallas beat him a few weeks later, though, to give them their first loss of the year.
Who's coaching the Cardinals there, Billy?
Eric Coryell.
Yeah.
Don Coryell really made his bones in San Diego, but he was there for 5 years. He made the playoffs twice. How many times have the Cardinals made the playoffs since they fired him right back there in 77? 7 times. 7 times. 7 times. I mean, when you think about that, I'm not saying Coryell would have led him to the promised land, but to think that 7 times, mind you, one was a Super Bowl that they really had a shot to beat Pittsburgh, but 7 times, man.
Yeah.
Just it tells you what an organization is. Maybe it's not that good.
I mean, it shows you how decisions have consequences.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Let's talk a little more bodybuilding, right? Trying to muscle in. We spoke at length about this, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, and Franco Columbu toning their bodies and getting ready for the Mr. Olympia contest at Madison Square Garden. The results are in. Those 3, along with a school teacher by the name of Frank Zane, posed it out. Columbu said of the heir apparent to Schwarzenegger Ferrigno, he lacks experience and a few body parts like a back and calves. When he stands with Arnold, he looks bigger because he is bigger. He looks impressive, but when they pose, Arnold's experience wins out. An amateur will be up against a professional. He was right. Arnold wins it. Interesting thing is Columbu would go on to win Mr. Olympia twice. That guy, Frank Zane, won it 3 times.
Right.
Arnold 7 times. But Lou Ferrigno, he never won Mr. Olympia.
What I found fascinating about Ferrigno is in the article they talk about that he had to put aside his other career he had at that time. He was a sheet metal worker.
Obviously.
But, he would not only succeed in the bodybuilding, but like Arnold, go get into the entertainment industry. And we all remember him in The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby.
Yeah. Yep. For the record, Mark.
Well, it's a really sad day for your record. The WFL has to announce the demise of the Detroit Wheels and the Jacksonville Sharks. It is so sad. The Wheels 1-13. At least they won a game. The Sharks, wasn't that the team that one of our first guests, Bob Thomas, was drafted by?
He never got the gift from him. Never got his shirt or something from him, didn't he?
Who knew?
Who knew? Hey, Jake.
Faces in the crowd, Billy?
Just Betty Mullen Bray. She was an American swimmer who represented the United States at the 1956 Summer Olympics in Australia. But it's really not about her. She had a son. Her son was named Mike. Mike Bray is the all-time winningest coach for Notre Dame basketball. He's, what is he, about 80 wins ahead of Digger Phelps.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
good career with the Irish.
He sure did.
That's good sleuthing there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, what do you got?
I got Al Clark, who was a senior at Hiawatha High in Kirkland, Illinois. He completed 18 of 22 passes for 330 yards. That's Al calling in.
It is.
And 7 touchdowns in his team's 46-7 win. He plays middle linebacker on defense. He also intercepted 2 passes and 7 tackles. But Al Clark's did not pursue his football dream. He was actually drafted by the Dodgers in the 33rd round.
Wow.
Never, I think, played Major League Baseball, but was drafted by the Dodgers.
Hey, just to get drafted, you have to be good.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah. 19th hole. I'll go real quick.
Go, man.
Sir, I myself like the picture of the nude in the article on Evel Knievel, but I didn't let my mother see the magazine. Mike Steinmetz, San Rafael, California. Smart guy, Mike. Smart guy. So, all right, that's going to wrap up the 10/21/74, otherwise known as October 21st, 1974 issue of Sports Illustrated. For Mark, for Bill, I'm Scott. We are past our prime.
All right, guys, let's move on.